it is timely, and we need to build on this for research of the African continent of basic social services are reclaimed and redeployed so as to better the lives of our people. Previous speaker has already gone into my notes. However, once I have 10 minutes, I will go deeply on 3 fundamental questions and recommendations. The first question we need to ask ourselves is whether or not Africa has right to its stolen assets. My answer to such question is in the affirmative. Yes, Africa has right to what has been stolen from Africa. The second question, whether or not the return of those assets should be driven by African or the enablers and associates of those who willfully stole assets from Africa. And lastly but not the least, can we establish that what is stolen is not earned? What is stolen is not earned. And as such, those in possession of stolen assets has no legitimate claim. The first speaker, Madam Julia, provided a broad base on what is assets. I would just want to briefly touch on assets so as to lay the basis to these questions that was asked. For us with accounting background, assets could be cash, it could be property, and of course, intellectual endowment, human capital. So back to the question of what had been stolen from Africa. Has cash been stolen? Has property been stolen? And to a larger extent, intellectual endowment. So these are investigations that I will read, that the research to be should also look into. I will give few examples. I will start with my own home country, Stone. Acquire 1 million acres of land, which make up 10% of the total land mass of the Republic of Liberia. Interestingly, an acre was sold for 6 cents. I don't know whether it is interestingly or disgracefully, I don't know. It was sold for 6 cents. Now, for colleagues who are online, who are lawyers, contracts, meeting of the mind. That means they both partners have equal capacity to negotiate. So I bring this example up to reflect exploited and her resources willfully stolen. This is why in my second fundamental question is like I'm asking, who should lead or who should drive the recovery of African assets? I certainly do not agree in all unequivocal terms that the enabler who have helped to loot the resources of Africa willfully be the one to drive the process. I will give another example from Nigeria. The Speaker of the House of Nigeria recently made a revelation that between, that between 2010 to 2011, about $46 billion have been stolen in crude oil for Nigeria, which is like 16.25 trillion naira. So then, if we were to ask ourselves these questions, all of this exploitation was not done by the locals. They were done by external actors, other state or non-state actors. That is why it is important that Africans, this group of people take new perspective and approach. It drives me to my second question. There is of a narrative that have been placed out there that will have to easily detect, expose, and reframe and strategize. So now the narrative people out there is like assets recovery to solely be on like political exposed pressing people. I'll give you another example. France, okay, France has no single gold mine within their borders, but yet France has 2.436 tons of gold reserve. Mali, as a country, has over 860 gold mines with an annual production of 50 tons, but yet have no gold reserve. So I am taking a perspective that those multinational institutions, those state actors who have colluded with politically exposed pressing to willfully take our resources should also be held accountable. And it's only Africa and Africans can lead this drive. I will submit to you, distinguished panelists and my audience, access recovery cannot be successful with the narrative being placed out for the loop the African. This background, I will make few recommendations as a way to enhance our trajectory as we recover what was taken from us and what is legally ours. The way forward, I suggest, one, as we're having now. And this conversation should lead to concrete action. It's a class action. I talk endowment. Are there evidence that human capital, intellectual endowment was willfully stolen from Africa? I suppose yes. Two, every country on the continent of Africa should start to make access, recovery, and return a matter of foreign policy. The United States government, Joe Biden, made a conversation with national government, our national legislatures, our assemblies, to make access recovery and the return of foreign policy issue. In that framework of transparent access management and control will be established. Another thing we need to do, we need to support institutions like NILS, the African Center, and other like-minded institutions to see how research is done that will arrive at a particular verifiable figures. For example, doing my research for this program, there is no accurate figure on the total amount of assets stolen from Africa. Professor Dario said the same. So we cannot. So one group will say 88 billion, one group will say 29 billion per annum, and there is no specific figure. So then it comes to another point. Statistics. We need to encourage our countries across the continent to start to take into consideration statistics on this issue so as to have verifiable figures as working instrument. Distinguished panelists and audience, it is important to also note that back beyond Africa, there are conspiracy to continue to make us to believe that all of our assets that have been stolen, portion that have been returned, favor have been done for Africa. I give you this scenario. When some of our dictators die and their funds remain in Swiss bank and whatever bank, who announced the figures to us? It's the bank. Who verified to say, okay, yes, the late Sani Abacha had 200 million in the Bank of France. It is the Bank of France to say, okay, Sani Abacha has 200 million. Is it true? Why do we accept? Ronald Reagan said, and I quote, trust but verify. Verification on what will be told in terms of what assets have been stolen in possession of people beyond Africa should jointly and equally be verified so as to ascertain how authentic and transparent it is. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, at the Intergovernmental Action Group Against Money Laundering in West Africa, a specialized institution of ECOWAS, we stay ready to work with and partner with institutions on these important issues so as to bring to light, to awareness with national leaders on the urgency in making assets recovery and return a foreign policy matter. AU and ECOWAS should lead the way. In most of their engagements, assets recovery with their counterpart, the EU, the US, and whatever, should be high on the agenda. And then back home in Africa, strong political will in our work we have established, especially in West Africa. All the countries in West Africa have framework for assets confiscation, for seizure. The question is, are those frameworks actually working? Almost all of Africa